what I'm really here to talk to you about is the opportunity, the economic opportunity of industrial hemp, like Tom was talking about. And the way that I came to this particular niche is through working on water policy with this group, One Florida Foundation Incorporated. It's a 501c3 that's based out of the Treasure Coast that works on water policy issues and tries to find solutions for the entire state of Florida. And the way that we came about all this is realizing the potential of what will be coming to the state. Now, first of all, even though we live in Florida, a lot of people don't realize that we have some serious water infrastructure problems. How many folks out there realize that we're going to be out of water somewhere between 2030 and 2040? Did you guys know that? That our aquifer is depleting at that kind of rate with the population that's moving into the state, with the development that we're having in the state, and with the resources that we currently have. That's the projection. We will then be importing our water and dealing with how we pay for other people for the resources that we're currently wasting. So hemp for water is a result of a question that we would hear often, which is basically, after seeing a Republican to a Democrat to whomever would listen to us in Tallahassee, those are great ideas, but how are you going to pay for it? Well, we're going to pay for it through this program that I'm about to tell you. But before we get into that, I do want to talk about a few items within hemp and what it can do. As Tom mentioned, there are thousands of uses for industrial hemp. Aside from the medical side, aside from the recreational, there are tens of thousands of uses for industrial hemp. And there's a huge opportunity for economy. Now, those other two areas in cannabis are great, and there's business opportunities. But if you want to really make some money, this is what you need to be considering, and I'm going to tell you how we can get there. But before we do, we need to understand a little bit more about these water problems. Okay, we live in the state of Florida, which means that the only thing constant is the fact that we're ever changing. We're fluctuating between heavy rain seasons and severe droughts on a constant basis. Okay, for every 5 to 7 years, we have to deal with a new set of problems. And we end up fighting each other, we end up fighting regionally, we end up fighting other states over a resource that we should be properly managing. We have lawsuits against Georgia for water coming down to irrigate our oysters. We have drought conditions in major cities most of the time, even during rainy seasons. We have sinkholes in the center of the state, saltwater intrusions at every major city all around the coasts, depletions of the springs in the aquifer, and over 15 billion, 15 billion gallons a day is flushed to tide out of either side, just through two of the inlets on the coast. That doesn't include the rest of the water areas that we're losing water resources in. Agriculture claims that it needs 18 billion gallons a day to continue its productivity and its activities. And then from a result of all the population and all of the water migrating down south, we are destroying our reefs and our habitats down in Key Biscayne and in the Keys. So there's some serious problems that we're dealing with in the state of Florida. And this idea is to look at these areas of critical concern. I went through most of them just a second ago, and they range from Apalachicola all the way down to the Keys. Oh, I'm going backwards there, sorry. And we were examining, all right, well, if you could fix everything tomorrow with today's dollars, what would it be? Well, most of the people in water policy said, well, if you had the ability to do that, it's going to cost between $30 to $50 billion to fix all of those 7 areas of concern. And those are just the start, by the way. But those 7 areas of main concern, and I will go backwards for a second here. These 7 areas here, if you were to fix them and work on them and come up with a plan to actually change the infrastructure to help them, then it's going to cost you $30 to $50 billion to do that. In addition to that, we want to figure out how to manage the water so that we don't have to continually waste the resources that we're flushing out to tide. That means infrastructure. That means that we have to build reservoirs, we have to build pipelines, we have to build mechanisms to move water around the state of Florida. I envision it much like we move gas around. We have no problems moving that resource around. Why can't we move water around? We're smart enough to do that. When we talk to people about the kind of infrastructure cost that that would take, it's $1 billion to $10 billion. So we said, okay, well, let's go for the maximum if we're going to talk about this, because like any plan in politics, this is just a starting point for discussion. We expect lots of people to come and give us criticism. We expect lots of, well, you should do it this way. Lots of, well, I would do it that way. And that's fine, but this is the starting point. So $60 billion to replumb Florida for the third time and provide an infrastructure which also provides jobs to make that happen. So we're back to that question again. Well, how are you going to do that? How are you going to pay for that? Well, the answer is hemp for water. And the way that we do that is through electing Bill Walsifer for Attorney General. Through the power of statute, and in the statutes, the Attorney General has the ability to pull things on and off or move things up and down the controlled substance list. Bill Walsifer is the only Attorney General candidate that is pledged to do exactly that. Day one, he'll remove industrial hemp with 0.3% THC or less off of the schedule, which will open up a massive economy overnight. And when I say massive economy, it's conservatively estimated at over $9.5 billion, which I'll get into in a second. But before we go into the economics of things, a little bit of a reminder of why hemp is a very important product and a very important crop. On average, it grows 4 times faster than any woody crop. That's one of the reasons. Wait a minute. Let's stop for a second. Do you all understand why we're in this room today and fighting for our medical rights and fighting for our personal rights? It's not because our government decided, oh, we have to protect everybody and make sure that they don't over-medicate on a plant that's never killed anybody in history. It's because of the industrial applications of this plant. In the 1930s, a group of I don't want to say business owners, but that's what it was. A group of business owners decided that they could not compete with hemp. There was a new invention that was coming out that was going to allow hemp to be separated from all of its components, and it would not require the intense physical labor that it took before to produce textiles, to produce paper and pulp, to produce oils and resins, that William Hearst in the paper and pulp industry, DuPont in the new nylon and oils industry, and U.S. Cotton all got together and said, hey, you know what? We can't deal with this competition. So let's start one of the best marketing campaigns in U.S. history. And let's demonize this plant as much as we possibly can. We're going to make up a name. It's going to be called marijuana. And that's because the Mexicans were bringing it across the border, and that sounded kind of Mexican. And it was a good way to blame the minorities, which is exactly what they did. They illustrated and orchestrated a program that has been so effective that for 80 years it's fooled the entire country into believing that this plant was the devil's weed, literally. It's not illegal because they're worried about us smoking or they're worried about medication or anything else. It's illegal because of economics. And you guys need to realize that, because if you're looking at this for a business opportunity, you need to take back your freedom and your ability to earn money and your ability to do the industries that you choose. And that's through running your government. So hemp grows 4 times faster. It can survive on the natural irrigation in the state of Florida. It requires virtually no fertilizer. It has its own natural defense mechanism, so it doesn't require pesticides. For those 3 reasons right there, that's why it's a better crop to grow, aside from the economic reasons. It also makes an excellent cover crop, and I'll get into that in a second. It can grow in almost any configuration, climate, or condition. It grows naturally pretty much in every state in the union after it was migrated over thousands of years ago through the natural course of migration of peoples. And hemp will yield $600 to $1,200 an acre profit, depending on what you grow it for. Florida is one of the world's largest importers of hemp. We import on a global scale most of the hemp in the world. We're in the top 10 of importers on a global scale. We're one of the top in the United States, and we make all sorts of products right here in Florida, from a plane that's made almost entirely out of hemp, to textiles, to swabs and balms and ointments, to a lot of other opportunities in food supplements and cosmetic supplements. There are literally thousands, tens of thousands of different products that can be made from hemp. Most importantly for the state of Florida, hemp could be the advantage and the savior for the citrus industry. We have a lot of canker and greening that's happening, particularly in this area. There's no citrus left around in this area. In Central Florida, where I'm from, most of the trees are dead. We have huge tracts of land that are sitting idle with farmers that are wondering how they're going to get their agricultural exemption. This is a really quick, easy way to put vegetative crops in the ground, receive an agricultural exemption, and do a lot of other positives along the way. So this is something that farmers should be extremely interested in. So when we do this, we're reversing a negative cycle. We're taking control of our government, and we're telling our government that, hey, we want these opportunities. And the way that we do that is through politics and through government. I'm going backwards again, sorry. So let's get back to that market size for a second. You guys are all here for business, and you want to know what the opportunities are. This is based on the fact that we have 9.2 million acres of farmland in production in the state of Florida. We assume, for this discussion, that 2 million acres will revert to hemp because of the profitability of it. So when that occurs, you look at what kinds of economy does that produce. Just in the farming, you're looking at 2.1. Processing is 1.4. This list here is just a sampling of some of the industries that could occur. Now, what we did for terms of discussion, again, is look at what each of these would produce from 500,000 acres apiece. And then we chose 4. The top 2, the bottom 2, to give us our 2 million acres. Okay, these are estimated ideas of revenue, economic activity, not revenue, economic activity that can be produced. Distribution is probably a woefully low estimate, as is sales is probably midline, and regulation is about 10 times low. But we think that about $9.6 billion will occur overnight in economic activity. Now, that's a lot of money. that's a lot of opportunity. And this is where the plan becomes unique in terms of its thinking out of the box and not being subscribed to any philosophy or any set of rules. We decided that, with this opportunity, $9.6 billion, we could either let that go to the general slush fund and let the legislators divvy up how that goes from the normal corporate tax rates and sales taxes and so forth. Or we could run our own government, and we could tell the legislatures, hey, you know what? We want to exempt industrial hemp from traditional taxes. And what we want to do by removing them from the traditional corporate taxes or sales taxes is replace it with an excise tax, because that's what you have to do on a specifically rated tax, is call it an excise tax. I will grant it to you, that's not a very libertarian principle, but this is an idea of how to fix problems, okay? So we exempt from traditional taxes, and we create this excise tax. It's called Hemp for Water, and we provide a way to channel, pun intended, revenues to water infrastructure problems. Okay, so what we're doing is we're telling our government, we don't want you to utilize the revenues from this new industry the way that you traditionally do. We want you to utilize the revenues from this new industry to solve problems and to create opportunities for solutions, as opposed to just divvying it up in what I call the general slush fund and into everybody's personal projects and pet projects. So, again, we're reversing the flow, the negative cycle. You elect Bill, you open up a market that's $9.6 billion. You get a tax revenue that's allocated directly to water infrastructure, and you solve a problem. Now, how fast does that really occur? Well, there's a couple of different ways that you can do it. You'll notice that if you take just the 5.5% corporate tax rate and you apply it to that $9.6 billion, doing rough numbers, it's going to take approximately 113 years to reach that $60 billion. That's a long time, but it is progress and it's movement forward. If you did it at the 7 to 8%, it's going to take between 89 and 78 years to do it. If you said, okay, look, if you're going to be in this industry, you're going to pay a little bit more than you normally would in business taxes, but all those taxes are going to go directly to solving a water infrastructure problem. And we decide collectively it's going to be at 15%. Again, these numbers are for discussion, folks. It takes 42 years to come up with $60 billion to solve those problems. So that's still kind of a long time. But you have to remember that we didn't get into the water infrastructure problems that we're in now overnight. It happened over a course of history. It happened over, coincidentally enough, several different occurrences in the early 30s that basically plumbed up Florida into different availabilities for development, for agriculture, for lots of different reasons. We didn't realize what we were doing, to be honest. But we did create lots of problems that we now have to fix 80-some years later, that are now coming to due in terms of how do we deal with these problems. So if you want to do it a little faster, you can pass Amendment 2, which we're all pulling for, and if it ends up being taxed at the 2.9% medical rate that Colorado has taxed, then these are how the numbers shake out. It drops them down just a little bit. If you want to do it a little faster, and this is not one that is a proponent of myself or my party, but this is for discussion, you utilize the dock stamps from Amendment 1, which says that 33% of dock stamps will go to water infrastructure and land conservation. Now, I want to point out that this will never happen. Again, this is for purposes of discussion and figuring out how we can utilize our resources to better our lot in the state of Florida. So, for purposes of discussion, if you take Amendment 1 and the 33% of the dock stamp taxes, and you put it into the idea of hemp for water, now, regardless of what percentage you tax it at, in less than 20 years, that's paid off. And we can move to the next problem. What's it going to be? Is it going to be helping out our veterans? Is it going to be helping out our seniors? Do we go back and fix the debacle that is education that we screwed up with the lottery? Because this is what we're talking about is another source of revenue that is big, if not bigger, in terms of the availability to provide structure and services from our government. So what are we going to do? Folks, with hemp for water, this is, again, a discussion and a point of an idea of how we can run our government. The idea is to elect people that are going to work for you. I happen to be a member of the Libertarian Party. We are the party that people are coming to instead of leaving because we have a pretty good understanding of the Constitution. And we have a pretty good understanding of health freedoms. And we have a pretty good understanding of personal freedoms. And we have a pretty good understanding of financial responsibility. What we need to do is help everybody else understand that their self-interest may be better served with us. What we need to do as citizens and as individuals is understand that you do not have to be beholden to any particular label. Folks, if you can pull 60%, 60.1% to pass Amendment 2, that means that you have the collective and individual power to vote for whoever you want. 33.4% is easily achieved if you're pulling 60.1%. And that means that you can vote and put anybody in office that is going to represent you. Not some party, not some other special interest, but the people that are going to work for you.